So, let's be real for a second. Have you ever felt totally overwhelmed because you just have way too many different interests? Or maybe you're sitting there right now feeling kind of lost about your career path. Well, if that sounds like you, you are in exactly the right place. In today's explainer, we're diving into some fascinating source material that uses the wildly unpredictable, often chaotic life of Steve Jobs as a masterclass case study. And our ultimate goal here? To figure out how to use his story to find our own clarity and direction. So, let's just get right into it. Okay, here is our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The search for clarity. 2. Dropping out and exploring. 3. Connecting the random dots. 4. 3 lessons for success. And 5. Taking action for yourself.
All right, let's kick things off with section 1, the search for clarity.
You know, if you've ever been passionate about a dozen different things but had absolutely no idea what your actual calling was, you definitely aren't alone. Steve Jobs' early life was chaotic right out of the gate. Born in 1955, he faced early rejection before being adopted by Paul and Clara Jobs. It was actually his dad who taught him out in their family garage that even the unseen parts of a machine need to be beautifully crafted. And Jobs was so intensely curious that as a kid, he literally called up the CEO of Hewlett-Packard out of the blue to ask for spare parts. Like, who does that? It actually landed him a summer job. But then, the timeline takes a really sharp turn in 1972. His adoptive parents had poured their entire life savings into sending him to Reed College, which was this incredibly expensive school. And Jobs, he felt so incredibly guilty wasting their hard-earned money on an education he honestly didn't care about. So, he made a massive life-altering decision. After just 6 months, he dropped out. And this perfectly illustrates a conflict pretty much all of us face at some point, following the system versus following your own interests. The system told Jobs he needed to stay in that expensive college to guarantee a safe future, just because that's what society expects, right? But Jobs took the vastly riskier road. He dropped out of his mandatory classes and just started dropping in on the ones that actually sparked his curiosity. We're talking stuff like calligraphy, spirituality, and Zen philosophy. Now, at the time, these seemed like complete and utter dead ends with zero career prospects.
Which brings us to section 2, dropping out and exploring.
Look, exploring the unknown is super messy. If you were watching Steve Jobs during this phase of his life, you'd probably think the guy was completely lost. He's studying fonts and spacing, he's deep diving into Zen thinking. In 1974, he even traveled all the way to India just searching for spiritual simplicity. Day to day, he was literally sleeping on the floors of his friends' dorm rooms. He was returning glass Coke bottles just to scrape together a few cents for food and walking miles across town every single Sunday for one good free meal at a Hare Krishna temple. I mean, talk about a scattered, totally random existence. But here's the thing. During all this wandering, Jobs was constantly evaluating himself. He was asking really tough questions to find some actual clarity. Questions like, am I doing what I truly want, or just doing what everyone else is doing? The source material really emphasizes this point. Asking yourself these difficult, uncomfortable questions is basically the only way to cut through the noise and figure out what actually matters to you.
Let's move on to section 3, connecting the random dots.
So this is the turning point where all of those scattered, seemingly useless interests finally start to click together into a massive success story. In 1976, his passion for electronics led him to team up with Steve Wozniak, and they founded Apple right in a garage. And it just exploded into a billion-dollar company. But then, in 1985, an absolutely devastating low. Jobs clashed with the CEO that he had hired and was actually fired from his own company by the board of directors. He was crushed. But he didn't stop. In 1986, he founded a new computer company called NeXT and acquired this little graphics division that would eventually become Pixar. You know, the studio that created Toy Story? Eventually, Apple started struggling. They bought out NeXT for its incredible technology, and boom, by 1997, Jobs is back in charge at Apple, using NeXT's tech as the literal foundation for massive future hits like the iPhone.
And all of this is captured just perfectly in this legendary quote from Jobs. You cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. Think about it. When he was taking that random calligraphy class after dropping out, it had absolutely zero practical application. But 10 years later, when he was designing the very first Macintosh computer, the whole shebang came back to him. Because of that one random class, the Mac became the first computer with beautiful typography and proportionally spaced fonts. His seemingly useless passion literally changed personal computing forever.
And even his biggest failure turned out to be a necessary dot to connect. The source material frames his firing from Apple not as some tragic end, but as a critical mindset shift. Actually, scratch that. It was more like a massive second rebirth. The heavy, crushing pressure of running a successful corporation was suddenly replaced by the lightness and freedom of being a beginner all over again. The source translates this to him becoming like a free bull, totally unchained, able to creatively build NeXT and Pixar without any of those stiff corporate constraints.
Okay, let's jump into Section 4, 3 Lessons for Success.
Now that we've got the case study down, the source breaks Jobs' life down into 3 really actionable steps for us. Number 1, action over thinking. It is so incredibly easy to just sit around consuming inspirational content all day. But true clarity, that only comes from actually getting up and doing things. Number 2, follow your passion. You've got to do it from the heart, or you simply won't have the grit to survive when things get tough. And number 3, combine your interests. Seriously, don't sweat it if your passions seem totally disconnected right now. By merging your different skills together, just like Jobs merged technology with Zen simplicity and design, you end up creating your own absolute uniqueness in the world. And to keep you on track with those 3 lessons, Jobs used one very specific, intense tool. After getting a rare cancer diagnosis, he experienced this profound wave of clarity. He started looking in the mirror every single morning and asking himself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I am about to do today? And if the answer was no for too many days in a row, he knew he had to change something. It basically forced him to ruthlessly cut out anything that didn't align with his true goals.
Finally, Section 5, taking action for yourself.
This is where we transition into the direct solutions pitched by the source to help you figure out your own path. To shift your mindset and start asking those hard questions, they highly recommend diving into some specific literature. Books like The Passion Test, The Art of Work, and The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, specifically homing in on the habit of beginning with the end in mind. The author's core belief here is that feeding your brain the right knowledge is step 1 to clearing up all that multi-passionate confusion.
So, to make this easier, the author introduces their own proposed solution. It's an educational platform called the Summary Board. Think of it as a highly curated platform packed with summaries of 70 powerful books, including the ones we just talked about, all specifically chosen to help you find your passion, get some direction, and finally answer those hard questions about your future. And they make a point to highlight how accessible this is, setting the price at a very specific 99 rupees per month. The pitch is pretty straightforward here. They point out that a monthly subscription to access 70 of these curated book summaries is literally cheaper than buying even one single physical book.
But as we know, knowledge without action is basically useless, right? So they also introduced the 21 Days Challenge. This is a live program which usually goes for about 1,000 rupees that involves interactive Zoom sessions, meditation, and really practical application exercises. The whole point is to convert all that theoretical book knowledge into real-world, tangible action.
Now, to add a little urgency, there is a cap on this offer, 500. The source announces that they are offering the 21 Days Challenge completely for free, but it's only for the first 500 people who subscribe to the Summary Board platform. They note that this is just because Zoom capacity limits how many people can actually attend the live sessions.
And wrapping up their pitch, the creator has a charitable offer. They mention that previous successful students have actually donated money to fund a giveaway. So for viewers who are genuinely struggling financially and literally cannot afford the 99 rupees subscription, there's a form to get access for free. Though interestingly, the source gives a pretty blunt warning. Do not fake being broke just to get a free spot, stating it'll bring you bad karma. It's a unique way to make sure those community-funded slots actually go to the people who need them the most to build their mindset.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer. We've unpacked the crazy chaos of Steve Jobs' early life, the magic of connecting the dots looking backward, and the actionable tools the source pitches to help you lock in your own clarity. But before we go, I want to leave you with that ultimate question, the exact same one Jobs used to ruthlessly edit his own life. If today were your last day, would you be doing what you were about to do? It is definitely a provocative thought to chew on as you figure out your own next steps. Thank you so much for joining me today on this learning journey, and I will catch you in the next explainer.